Good afternoon, Katie.
Hi, how are you doing? I
I'm
love
doing
that.
very well. Well, everybody, hello and good afternoon. I'm Adam Bricker, Executive Director of the Carolina Cyber Center at Montreat College. The theme of our conference is developing cybersecurity professionals of character. Excuse me. And as Dr. Maurer articulated just a few minutes ago, we define character as positive values in action and the gap between your actions and intent. Now imagine your job is to change the organizational culture, structure of accountability and responsibility, and paradigms of an operation in 1 million companies across the United States. Not just any companies, but companies charged with developing technology and services to protect our country. And by the way, you're not sure you have the full authority to do so. What a nightmare. So during this session, we explore how one cybersecurity leader's character, grit, and discipline came to bear on such a massive endeavor, the design and implementation of CMMC and other responsibilities from Ms. Katie Arrington. It's really not necessary to repeat the speaker's bio, but since it's quite relevant to the discussion we're about to have, listen to the range and depth of the responsibility Ms. Arrington faces. Catherine Katie Arrington is currently the Chief Information Security Officer to the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment. In this position, she serves as the central hub and integrator within the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment to align acquisition and sustainment cyber strategy. As the CISO, Ms. Arrington is responsible to ensure the incorporation of integrated security and cyber efforts within the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment. Now, think about the challenges that she faces here. She's leading efforts to help, ensure robust supply chain management, establish a defense industrial base security and resilience, and establish a common standard in cybersecurity, including the massive CMMC effort. It's a joke that sounds pretty easy, Katie. Sounds pretty easy. When marketing this talk, I said this wouldn't be an interview of what they say softball questions. For our audience, please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box within Zoom and pose some of those questions to Ms. Arrington, and we'll curate those. And if there's time at the end, we'll pose those to her as well. Katie, good to see you again. And thank you so much for your leadership, your service, and lessons that we seek from you today.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. And that rock climbing, really, it's a good sport though to do during, COVID. You're all by yourself.
I know I still have the dust here.
There you go. So I was actually, when you were walking through what are the critical foundations of what this week is about. And those are literally the things that I talk about, which are making the CMMC possible. That you cannot, and those of you that are on this webinar right now, I beg of you, don't let anybody ever dictate the terms of what you think you can do and how effective and impactful you can be. The CMMC is this massive effort. It is taking the NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, special publication 800-171. Our DIB partners are mostly small businesses. If you think about that, so here's the complexity broke down, as I like to say, Barney style. I work for the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition, Ms. Ellen Lord. She is solely responsible for $350 billion of acquisition annually. $350 billion. My job is to find out ways to make the DIB, the Defense Industrial Base, more secure. The DIB partners, they're about 300,000 companies that range from the local catering service provider in your neighborhood, all the way to the people building, hypersonics and nuclear warheads. And how do you get cyber to fit all of those with knowing that they all have to have this standard NIST 171 available to them? And they have to be able to, first, trust but verify. We have to tell them what we want. Then we need to really make it auditable, right? So we can validate what we're seeing and find out a way to make us easier for us to pay for the services we want. I came into the department in January of 2019, and I'm going to go a little bit off. I don't often talk about this, but I figure with what you have today as your elements, I can't tell you how I don't believe in coincidence. And those value sets are everything that I think I am. So if you don't know my bio, I have more college credits than most PhDs, but I've never gotten a 4-year degree because I was a military wife and I moved every 2 years. So I'm old. Those of you who are on here are probably young. I'm almost 50 in my world. That's, it's older than I ever thought I would be. But in the 80s, it wasn't like we had online education, right? It was literally every time as a military wife, we moved to a new duty station, I would have to go and take all the basics over again because you have to have those core classes that are aligned to the university that you're with. So I literally have been to seven different technical colleges, and I've taken accounting one-on-one 7 times. But I never got a 4-year degree. I came into cyber from owning my own company of doing land development. And I met some people from Booz Allen Hamilton, and they thought I was interesting. They asked if I would apply for this position. And I'm not kidding. The day one of my job at Booz Allen, I was in a capture management team, and they were using all of these acronyms. And I was an Army wife. I knew what an e-tool was, but these were big acronyms. I didn't want to let them see me sweat. And I remember distinctly that day writing down every acronym. And on my way home, I stopped off at Barnes and Nobles, and I bought acronyms for the DoD for dummies and IT networking for dummies. And I immersed myself in education. I went to my local community college. I enrolled in courses. I immersed myself into cyber and became a cyber vice president of a cyber firm. I mean, I've worked at every level from a large business to a small business and in between. And then I became a legislator because I believed in cyber. There was something about cybersecurity that got to me. And there's always a story and a history behind it. My kids are military dependent. Their dad was Army, and my son was born with something called craniosynostosis, and he had to have a lot of surgeries and whatnot. But it's my daughter, military child, a dependent, had some procedures when she was little, had a scar on her neck, and she went to go enlist in the Army, like her father. And they had gone through the entire process. And at the final stages, they said, well, we don't have the data about your scar. And she's like, well, it happened at a military base, at a military hospital. Can't you go back and look at it? And they didn't have the capability or the technology. And that made me really think, the military doesn't have the capability to go back. And then I started really to think about medical records, your medical records, and how you should be able to own those. And that's one of the reasons I ran for office, was about cyber and giving people ownership of their documents. Right now, your insurance company owns your health records. You don't. You have to ask permission to send them. And that was the catalyst that drove me to run for office and to do that. Got it. And then when the opportunity to come work in the department in 2019, the people that leaned in with me said, Mr. Fahey, the Assistant Secretary of Acquisition, and Miss Lord, both looked and said, you have these character things about you. You're a critical thinker. You've got grit. You're technologically, you're very sound. You're incredibly disciplined, and you are the queen of collaboration. You managed to pass bills in legislatures that had never been moved in 20 years. Will you come on board? And I took all that with me, right? Because what this team did, is we created something that had never been done before. We didn't let the rules define us, and we didn't let anything get in the way. I broke a barrier, came right out in the beginning and said, cybersecurity is different. It's foundational. And there were a lot of people that said, no, you trade security off for cost, schedule, and performance. And I said, absolutely not. If you do not bake security in, whether you deliver on time it's not relevant or not. If you're delivering on time and your adversary or your competitor has the capability, who cares? It doesn't matter if the cost is to the point that if by the time I deliver it to the warfighter, that no matter what I paid in it, they've outmatched the technology or capability. And it absolutely doesn't matter if I did it, the performance metrics that I set. If by the time I get there, the schedule and the cost and the performance are all I said it should be 3 years ago when I started the acquisition strategy to delivery, it doesn't matter. It had to be foundational. And how do you make such a cultural shift with one 4'11", 100-pound, and I joke around, I call myself the pit bull, to come into the department and take a department that is, we're risk weary. We don't like to take a lot of risk in the department. Not our thing. People's lives depend on it. But we had to do something because we saw what was happening. And we saw that the adversary, when you look around about cybersecurity and you think about how much money we're losing, I saw a report today that we're losing something like $4 trillion a year globally. We're losing $600 billion, that's with a B, every year to cybersecurity exfils, data breaches, IP, totally stealing the IP, and ransomware. That's $4,000 after taxes for every US citizen there is today, every year. And our acquisition lives in these 5-year life cycles, right? So we have today, and then the base year, and then 4 option years. So most of what we're going to do today, anything I do won't really be changing for 5 years. It's in a contract. And I've got these things that I see coming. It's the capability of 5G really being a commercial capability. 5 years down the line for us in the US. Think about quantum, right? Quantum computing available in a commercial space in about 5 years. And you look at a small business today, and if you were to imagine, I do a lot of analogies, your house is a small business. And the way that you protect your house is windows and doors that have locks on them. And you lock them up at night because you want to protect what's inside of it and protect when you're away from your home. And imagine your roof as how you keep the elements in and out. It's the flow of information. So imagine your house is a small business and you have no doors, no windows, and no roof. That's what 2025 looks like for small business. And we needed to do something to help them because the United States, greatest country on the planet, bar none, hands down. I don't care who you are. It is the greatest place to live. But our adversaries, they don't like us so much. They don't want our way of life to continue. They would much rather see us fall and fail. So the DIB, the industrial base, those 300,000 companies, they are your national security. Those people that work in the research triangle there in North Carolina, they are your national defense. We don't build anything here in the Department of Defense. We contract for it, we program for it, we write policy for it, we don't build it. That's the community, the DIB. And if they aren't prepared to deal with the adversary coming at them, I like to say one team, one fight, right? The United States. You think about for China, every single individual in that country works for one goal, and that is the government and whatever the government needs. How are companies based in the United States that are small businesses, they're just, they're innovative, young entrepreneurs, how are they supposed to defend themselves against a nation state attack? How are they supposed to have all of the knowledge at their fingertips to prevent that? And that's what I was charged with. I came into the department. I had no experience really in actually being a GovE. I came in as an HQE, highly qualified expert. I broke the rules on how you developed policy in the department, where I said, it can't be built, whatever we build this CMMC on, it's the NIST is the foundation. But whatever we create, we have to do it in collaboration with the industry and academia. If we don't do it in that fashion, it will never be executable, because we in the department don't understand the barriers that are faced with industry as they're trying to implement those cybersecurity controls. And what we really needed to do was not have another checklist, right? Nobody needs a checklist. We needed to impart the critical thinking around cybersecurity that companies could take and walk. You know, I'm almost 50, and I can remember my first flip phone. It was a pink Razor. If anybody remembers though, and I bedazzled it with Swarovski crystals, it was wonderful. But when Al Gore created the internet, he really didn't know what he was doing, right? It was a real big thing. And we had these flip phones and we were able to access the internet, and we didn't think about the critical thinking behind, if I approve this app, what power am I giving the creator of that app? And when I open this network and I can send a fax, can they send one back? Can someone see the fax in the digital? You know, you look at the Willy Wonka when the little boy gets transported by the TV. Your adversary from back then, 20 plus years, China, make no bones about it. They're strategic and long term. Our democracy is fledgling compared to the Chinese dynasty. Think about that, right? We're a couple of 100 years old, thousands. They're long term. They're strategic. And they knew that we took our eye off the prize for a minute. And they went and have been hitting us, and not just them, you know, Russia, North Korea, Iran, litany, but China more specifically, because they blatantly have been stealing our IP. You know, they have been taking things, and back when I was, you know, a million years ago, I worked at a company that designed the original camping chair, folding camping chair. And once they developed it, we took it overseas to China to manufacture it. And within 6 months, in every superstore that I walked into, there was folding collapsible camping chairs that an individual in the US invested in getting the patent, developing the capability, innovating, and China built on top of it. So think about that. They're not really great at innovation, and imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So I assume the fact that they copied our F-35 is just they really think we're that good. I don't want to have them do that anymore. I don't know about you, but for me, it's I want to get everybody good. And we went out, we talked to industry, we talked to academia, and we created this model. And in the model, we did it in maturity levels 1 through 5. And level 1 are basic cybersecurity requirements you should be doing right now. There's no excuse. All the way up to the highest and best security that we can offer here in the United States. And in there, companies all fit. And we needed to understand that security is not one size fits all. It is something that needs to be tailored per program. So we created this maturity model. But moreover, we created the critical thinking. So instead of you, cyber experts at a company, saying, let me check the box to see if you have two-factor authentication, we created the model to ask yourself, why would you need two-factor authentication? What are the things that I'm trying to protect? How am I regulating my network access that I would need some with just a password, and I need this data needs to be protected with two-factor authentication? Why do I need encryption? What is my network? What do I have connected in my enterprise that could cause harm if the adversary was able to see, read, download, or scan information? And that's what we went out to create. And it took a team of individuals that from, you know, the collaboration to sit down and have the grit. And I mean the grit, because I came in January, we started in March, and I told the team, we have until January 1st, 2020 to get a model. We have to collaborate with industry. We have to do a tremendous amount of publicity to bring companies, individuals, academia to the table. We need to take what they say and their feedback and ingest and adjudicate it from March to January of 2020 and put it out to industry to help. Nobody had ever done that. Nobody had ever gone openly before policy was created and said, help us create it. It was so different that at first people thought I was kidding. They didn't understand. And they're like, well, what are you doing? I'm like, well, we're going to change this. And understanding all of the complexity that came into that and needing the technical brain of, many, many, many SMEs to help understand the really highly advanced cyber, which I won't say that I'm expert by any stretch on. And the collaboration of an industry provider saying, that's not how I interpret what you're saying. That's not what I read. And for them to come together was just amazing. And the volunteers, and we're talking hundreds and hundreds of volunteers who have dedicated 30 plus hours a week to doing this. Why? Because if you aren't as strong as me and you're not as prepared as me in the Internet of Things, I'm just as exposed, I'm just as vulnerable as you. And we look at the information superhighway, the analogy I'll give to the CMMC. And this is for any of you that are looking to be, you're in business or going into business or you work for a business. When we get technology, and I'll use fire, right? The caveman found fire and it was an amazing capability and he loved it. She loved it. And they realized, really quickly that it could keep them warm, that it could cook their food, and it could fend off from enemy attack, right? That if a tiger was coming at and you flung fire at them, they might run away. But you also had to understand the risk associated with it. You had to understand, and we learned through trial by fire, literally, if you touch it, it will burn you. If you put it against wood, wood can make you warm and create a fire, but it can also burn down your house. We had to learn the risk reduction strategies to use the technology to our advantage. Fast forward human beings to the automobile. And when cars first came out, there were no rules. You bought a car and you could drive it wherever you wanted. And imagine the freedom that technology gave you. What would take you days to get to a destination could take you just under 8 hours. But we had to learn the risk associated with it. And while we were doing that, right, we realized, we could get hurt. We could run each other over. We started moving in the same environments, and we realized that we all needed to be vested as we created roads that common shared access. So what did we do? We defined the rules of the road. We did it for every state in the country, right? Everywhere you go, you get a driver's license. That is an aptitude of your understanding of the risk reduction strategies from hurting each other while you're driving on the road. And we evaluate your capability, your maturity at your permit and your driver's license. If you have the level of maturity and understanding how to really execute those risk reduction strategies, you are permitted to drive on the road with everyone else. And how do we validate your continuous capability? Your insurance. Your insurance rate is a direct reflection of how well you use those risk reduction strategies. So think of the CMMC as your company's driver's license for the digital highway. That's the likening to it. It's to trust but verify that you are capable to protect yourself and your business against adversarial threat, knowing what's coming at you, the intensity and what the adversary wants. And know that the smallest of companies in our supply chain is no more less or more important than the largest prime. People think that, I'm just a small No, the adversary wants everything. And if they can take out the small business, they can do ransomware where the company can't, they just don't have the funds and they lose all their IP. If they exfil them and they put out their information that they're a bad company to work for because they don't have the security on their personnel and they exfil their data, or the adversary messes with guidelines or specs in development and you don't create what you think you are. The adversary wants that. They want to create something within our country, which is the effects of not trusting each other and not wanting to do business with each other. So I refuse to let them in. I refuse to give in, and I hope you do too. And I hope that no matter what our country looks like right now, it's the best country on the planet because we have this opportunity to have this discussion. It's huge. You think about that. We definitely are lucky in that, and that lucky that we have this capital market to protect. Right? And that if you do great work and you are energetic and you are determined and you have grit and you set yourself up and you think critically about what you want, there is nothing you can't obtain in this world. And that's got to be something that we take in earnest as we go forward and we look at how can we get good. Sharing threat is not a bad thing. We need to be able to share that information. That's going to be a big part of the CMMC is sharing the threat, because the adversary is coming at every one of us. It's highly unlikely that the adversary would go after you, a company, where they're not going after a massive amount of them. It's a lot easier when you're creating a DDoS attack. You're going to send it to an entire supply chain, right? And it's cheap and it's easy. And remember, the likelihood of the next war starting in a kinetic fashion is extremely unlikely. We position ourselves so that we shouldn't have to use kinetic, but cyber war is going on right now. We're in the height of an election. And we have people that believe everything they read. Stop. Think. Give yourself some critical thinking, right? Do some research. And make yourself knowledgeable before you make a decision. That's the big thing. You've got to have the critical thinking and the grit and the technological capability to go out and say, you know what, that doesn't seem quite right. In a company, do you know who's the most likely to have a cyber attack within a organizational structure? Yes?
CFO.
The EA.
EA.
Because why? Their job is to read every email. They're clicking, they're clicking, they're clicking.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that we have to stop and think critically. Wait a minute. How do I do that? How do I ensure that my team knows what to look for in a fake email, the misspelling of one letter? When we did the GAO report, the IG report on contractor networks, the three greatest findings that we had, the whole of government, Department of Defense and the DIB. Number one, we weren't changing our passwords. Simple things like changing your passwords. People are not doing it. Two-factor authentication, not using it, and not marking the data appropriately. So it was the easy cyber hygiene stuff. If we did the easy stuff every day, imagine how much good we could get out of that and reduce the loss of $600 billion a year. I would much rather, pay for the CMMC, because that's part of the thing. I've made security an allowable cost, but pay a little bit on the upfront to have companies in the best posture they can to buy down that cost, so we can invest in the R&D and we can invest in those innovative companies and invest in our academics and universities to keep us on the technological edge, because we are. And never forget that. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Your adversaries don't have to innovate much. They have you. And remember, there is a long, long line of people that want to come to school here to have the choices and the chances you do. I don't see lines like that for any other country in the world. Nobody, our education system and how we are able to do that, far superior to anyone else in the world, because we really do focus on the individual, what the contributions of that person to a company, to an effort, to a mission. We appreciate that and realize that's what makes this nation great. So I can't tell you, I love your, that the critical thinking, the discipline, the curiosity, the grit. It's amazing. That is the best, I would say, basis for a session of webinars I've heard in a long time, because I can always find the technical piece. It's the individual. I can train somebody on something, but it's got to have that. They got to have that core, that grit, that want to do it. And we all have it. You just got to find out what makes yours come out. Mine happens to be cyber. I love it. I think it's the most amazing tool that we have in our tool chest. And you think about COVID and you think about how much the world has changed since March. And you think about cyber as that thing that connects all of us together. Families have been able to stay in contact globally with the internet. Family members who are their last fleeting moments on earth are through FaceTime because they're quarantined and isolated. People are getting their health care from their computer, their education, their livelihood. You got to take it seriously because it's the one thing we all have in common, no matter what. And I've asked people this, and in the beginning of my speeches, I said, name one thing in your world that doesn't have cyber. And somebody said to me, an Apple. And I said, unless it got there magically, there was cyber behind it, whether it was in logistics, in the genetic altering of the seed, of the way you paid for your Apple. And then somebody said love. And I said, nah, I met my third husband on eHarmony. We've got that algorithm. So let's remember that cyber is something that everyone has in their life. It is a career of thinking of what is next. You've always got to be curious. You've always got to be thinking about the next thing because the adversary is electronic warfare, right? As soon as you close up one gap, they're going to find another gap. And it's such an amazing area of change and progression. It's never stop with the curiosity, never stop collaborating and talking to other people, because know that this capability that we have has changed our lives exponentially and will for many, many, many years to come. But it's only when we use it together and we understand the risks associated that it won't cause us harm. So I know I went a little bit off there, but I can't tell you how amazing it is to be in this position, to be at a catalyst for change, and to be that person that's able to say, we can do this. And not hearing, I would say my best character trait is that I don't even hear the word no. I don't hear it. If you say no, it just means I've got to find a different road to yes. And remember that if you feel it in your core that it's the right thing, work for it. They told me time after time, I can't tell you the amount of people within the department, within industry, that told me you cannot do the CMMC. I said, underestimate me. That'll be fun. Watch. When you give people control, you respect that they have input, and you allow them to collaborate, the world is your oyster. And people said it couldn't be done. In 1 year, we created the model. We created training, certifications. We changed the DFAR rule, the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation. We did it all as a team. So I leave you today. I'll open it up for calls. And I know you can go and look at our website and look at the model, and no, it's not perfect by no means. I hope it never is. I hope it always is something that makes us think and be curious. Are we doing enough? Are we thinking enough about what the adversary would do? That I want to be able to mold it and to put that critical thinking in it. I don't want it to be a checklist. I hope that it's never 100%, because then I'm afraid of where we'll go. And the CMMC, it started with the DoD, it's going federal. Pay attention. And if you haven't read the National Cyber Solarium report, you should. It's a big deal. Other than that, so I will open it up for questions. I know we only have a couple of minutes, but I got caught off guard off that. That was amazing.
Katie, thank you so much for your time. I think we may have just a couple of questions left. Well, what surprised you the most going through this journey? I got to believe people attack the process. They attack the people. They probably attacked you. They probably attacked the governance. What surprised you the most over the last couple of years of this?
The personal, right? Like they make it personal, and I don't understand that. It's I'm not the CMMC. I just happen to be the mouthpiece. The CMMC is a movement, but people only put down what they fear, and those attacks are fear. Fear that I'm not good enough, that I didn't realize how bad I was, the fear that I may lose my work because I don't have the capability that they think I might have. So the amount of fear, the attacks, and the way it just manifested. I mean, that would be the thing that shocked me the most. Absolutely.
And you mentioned recently in one of your talks about the new DoD adaptive acquisition framework.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Can you explain that a little bit to us?
Oh my gosh. So as we have gone through and we've realized that we had to update the way we did security, we also realized we had to change the way we were doing acquisition, right? That you couldn't do the standard acquisition processes that we've been doing for 60 years. So we came up, and what we did, the 5000 series, if you don't know anything about the DoD 5000, it's the instruction on how a PM sets up their contracting strategy. Prior to a month or two ago, it was 300 or 400 pages of every sin of every contractor that ever lived documented. And
Just in case.
Just in case. What it did is told people, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. And my boss, Mr. Fahey, the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Acquisition, when I started the CMMC, he at the same time started this with the Undersecretary, Ms. Lord. We need to be able to give that critical thinking to the PM, and they need to be able to structure acquisition and tailor it to what they're trying to create. Software. There isn't very many things out in our world today that aren't software enabled, right? Software enabled hardware. You just have software COTS packages. So we actually wrote an acquisition pathway that has a colorless way of funding it, because right now you've got to think about RT. Is your money for R&E? Is it R&D? Is it OEM? And Congress and the department said, no, software acquisition is different. You don't know where you're going to be. Your strategic end is I want this type of capability, but you don't know if it could be delivered in 6 months or 12 months. I mean, you're taking a risk, yes, but the way we do DevSecOps and we've moved through this and we do these iterations, the standard acquisition didn't apply. So they created an entire pathway. And in that, all of the different pathways, there are 6 new pathways. All of them have one common factor. That's cybersecurity. We built it into every acquisition. So as of December 1st, every contract with the DoD will have some cyber requirement in it as we roll the CMMC out, because it's going to take us 5 years. But as of December 1, you're going to have to trust but verify. You're going to have to log in as a contractor into the SPURS system, the Supplier Risk Reduction Portal, and actually rate yourself on a scale from 1 to 110 on how you're imparting those NIST controls. So we've made it foundational. It's a huge change.
And valid for the commercial industry as well.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, it's a rising tide raises all boats. We're 300,000 companies. Think of the influence that when we make security, you have to trust but verify and get your CMMC. How many other companies are just going to have to get themselves together to rise with that tide? So, like I said, raising tide raises all boats, and cybersecurity is right up at the top.
Katie, I had 111 more questions for you, not the least of which was to relate to strong nuclear force to the gravitational theorem, but we'll hold off on that. But Katie, I know you're super busy, freakishly busy. Thank you so much for your time today. It was an honor. Thank
you guys send me the questions. I'll respond to them. But you have brilliant young minds, and you do. My husband's a Tar Heel. I'll give you this. You have some of the best universities in the country, even though I'm not a fan of all of them. You guys are amazing. Montreat, you guys are phenomenal. Thank you for the opportunity today. And I'll leave you with my saying, stay positive, test negative, and be kind. Just do those 3 things and we'll get through this together.
Kind. Katie, thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.